Hello and welcome to Art Show. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me John Wynn. Hey, John, how are you?
Hello, Craig. Great. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, as normal, I went online and you had a whole host of images that I was excited to see. Let me sort of move this out of the way. And so it was tough to make a selection, right? So you have so many great things.
Thank you.
But I really wanted to start with this piece in particular because this was the first series I saw of yours, and it really had a fantastic sticking in my head. I guess
Hmm.
I put that. Can you tell me a little bit about this one?
Yes, sure. This is from my series called Whiskey Rebellion,
Hmm.
and the entire series was built on these 1960s vintage whiskey decanters. So that soldier is a decanter from Jim Beam whiskey. His hat comes off, and there's a cork in it, and that's where how you got the whiskey.
So you
It's
had a number of these.
yeah,
Where did you find all of these whiskey bottles? Did you inherit them or just you search them out?
My husband Bill, his godmother inherited them from an eccentric uncle of hers who back in the 60s collected over 300 of them. And they weren't all Revolutionary War figures. They were Birds of America and the 50 states and Hollywood stars and vintage cars. But his godmother Arlene knew that I liked working with vintage materials and said to Bill, "Don't you think John might be interested in these?" So they had me over, and I mean, most of the boxes were still hadn't been unpacked since the 60s. So, and this was about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I just flipped out over them. That first, just the kitsch value, and I love kitschy things, and I'm like, oh my God, these are so campy.
Uh-huh.
But then I dug deeper, and the Revolutionary War series in particular really spoke to me because there was an opportunity there to tell an updated story about history and about this notion of heroism.
Mm-hmm. So when you saw these,
Yeah.
did you have an immediate idea about how you wanted to transform them, or was your process more like experimental along the way?
I immediately knew that I wanted to embellish them.
Mm-hmm.
And because my day job is jewelry designer, because these fellows had, necks, I immediately saw necklaces on them.
Uh-huh.
The narrative aspect of it, this rethinking of heroism and using the language of jewelry and monuments and
Right.
protest pins, that came later and was more of an iterative process.
So I'm curious about the basis for these because you do use quite a number of books as bases for your pieces. Are the books really are they directly tied to the story of the piece itself, or are you looking at it more, say, for size, color, shape, that kind of thing?
It's a bit of a combination.
Hmm.
So the books where the spine is the name of the book is exposed. In this case, this is a soldier. He's like probably a teenager, scared
Hmm.
to death, going to war, and out of his comfort zone. So the book How to Be a Man by Glenn O'Brien seemed like a perfect fit.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the Peter Pan syndrome. Hold on one second. My computer is playing games with me. The Peter Pan syndrome about men boys who won't grow up
Right.
also seemed fitting. The bottom book was more of just a beautiful spine, and I actually obscured the title of it with those yards beer bottle.
Okay. So it's a little back and forth between the
Yeah,
two. I
but the
love the
book,
idea that you have these loaded things, book titles and the image itself, and you're creating a new storyline by adding them all.
yeah.
But it also leads me to the next piece I wanted to show. Oops, sorry. This piece.
Okay.
So I saw these and I thought I was just blown away by these. I love the simplicity of them, but the monumentality. I can imagine these as gigantic, right?
Yes, me too. That's one of my dreams.
So yeah, that was actually my first question is the scale of a lot of your works. You have these these sculptures that are very sort of personal,
Yes.
but do you imagine them as much larger? Are you hoping to pursue that?
Yes, I am. And in fact, I've had some conversations about enlarging these.
Mm-hmm.
I know how it would happen. I know who could make it. You know, the digital atelier at the Johnson Atelier up by Grounds for Sculpture.
Right.
There's other places as well, but I know that they could take something like this, scan it, and then robotically carve it out of this dense foam and then coat it with a urethane paint that could last outdoors for 50 years. Like the
Oh,
technology is there, but you don't just do that. You need the partner, you need
right.
the space.
And it
But
would be nice if you had it already sold to begin with. Otherwise, it's just sitting around with giant sculptures.
right. But so far, what I've been able to do is get it out of my system by creating digital composites. So I've put a number of these outside the UN, alongside the Schuylkill River, in front of City Hall, and those are, I think, in the same section you found this photo on my website.
Yeah.
And that's been really gratifying to see it, the digital space. And the
So,
whole idea is that they're riffing on the traditional monument, but
mhm.
trying to find a new way to talk about honoring people and the language of monuments. And instead of George Washington on a marble column, it's literally every man. In this
Yeah,
case, these are little architectural figures that are used to populate an architectural model. And they're not a black or white or brown person. They're neon colored.
right.
The water bottles are this universal stand-in for the column. And then the drippy, oozy stuff is wet plaster, which I've taken plaster, which is the material of sculpture and classicism,
Hmm.
and turned that on its head and made it more of a corporeal, body fluid,
Hmm.
sexual. It's not an accident that there's this oozing white
Right.
material on this phallic bottle.
Well, that's why I love this particular piece so much. Your other works to me have these wonderful storylines that you have to dig into, but pieces like this,
Mm,
I like the fact that you've left it so open for people's imagination, people's ideas in it. So I
thank you.
find it
That's
really
great.
intriguing. Yeah, I'd love to come back to see that one. So when I came to your studio, this
Mhm,
was the first piece that really was
mhm.
sort of bowled me over. Now, this is a little bit earlier, correct?
This was done after my mom passed away in 2014. I
Okay.
worked on this off and on over the next 5 years or so.
Hmm. Is
And
it
it
complete?
it is complete, yes.
Okay.
Well, it's complete except that those memorial candles on the stainless steel platform,
Yeah.
I keep adding more of those. In Jewish
Okay.
culture, every Jewish holiday, we light these candles to remember those who aren't with us anymore. And my idea is like when you visit an Italian church and the candles are just toppling over each other, there's
Right.
so many of them that I'm going to keep adding candles to this piece, as long as I'm alive, and
Right.
that keeps it living. But the
But the rest of the structure is done,
yes,
correct?
and the idea behind it, my mom was a metal sculptor, did these intense, very very bold abstract metal sculptures
Mm-hmm.
using old car parts and other found objects. And as she got sick from ovarian cancer, and this very powerful woman was weakened by this disease, I started to have these nightmarish visions that the cancer was a cyborg and
Hmm.
it was invading my mother's body and turning her from a person into a cancer cyborg.
Hmm.
And when she died and all of her possessions were just sort of in limbo, and we were trying to figure out as a family, what do you do with everything? As an artist, I immediately thought, I want to create a sculpture
Hmm.
illustrating this journey from my mother to a cancer cyborg.
Hmm.
That's what's going on here.
What I really enjoyed about this piece, I'll be honest with you, because I'm familiar with your mother's work.
Mhm.
This is completely your language to me, right?
Yeah,
It's your shapes, your marks, your ideas, and I was thrilled by that. It was just so clear to me.
thank you.
So I wanted to shift over this little guy. So you had mentioned earlier that you do, jewelry work, and I have a piece I want to show later. Um, so this is kind of like a combination of the two. Were you invited to make this? Was this a
Yes, this
commission
was for
piece?
one of Bridget Mayer's benefit exhibitions, where in this case I was given these 10-inch square panels,
Hmm.
and it was really a challenge for me to figure out, well, what do I do with this, and
Hmm.
which language am I talking about? And I always am interested in narrative work. So
Hmm.
all of the china in this was, my grandmother was as big a collector as I am, and she
Very nice.
collected teacups. And when she died, I was the only person who wanted these things, and so I have a huge collection of china teacups, and all very kitschy and old fashioned. And I use that as the materials for the background. The bird was a flea market find, and at the time I was doing a series bird of these kinds of ceramic bird boxes as part of a project for John Wynn Jewelry. We also make jewelry boxes.
Hmm.
So my two worlds came together, which is increasingly what I'm looking for. And
Mm.
so I made a series of three different birds, and really the colors dictated my choice of the shards in the background. And then I thought it was funny to have the bird building a nest using jewelry components, which is basically a metaphor for me and my journey
Uh, yeah,
building
you
my
can see
nest.
that in the work. That's why I like about your work. You have this wonderful little storyline that the more you look at it, and then
Mm-hmm.
the background information that you're giving me now makes it even richer.
Right.
This
And
is
I hope it works on both levels. That is always something on my mind.
It does.
Yeah. Okay, good,
So
good.
this is a little unusual for you because most of the work I know is for sculptural work, 3D work for you. And this is still 3D, but wall work is not something that is normally something that you do, correct?
Well, these days, correct. When I started my art practice, it was almost entirely paper collage.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
a different impulse, but
Uh-huh.
over time, and ironically, my mother, who was a real inspiration to me in her art journey, she started as a painter, but once she discovered sculpture, never looked back. And
Hmm.
I sort of feel the same way, that all that paper collage that I did, I value it in its place in my journey, but I really am not thinking about it in those ways anymore,
Do you
about
do you
art.
think three-dimensionally when you're contemplating things?
I would say I think about ideas first,
Hmm.
and the idea dictates then how do I execute it.
Okay. I did want to show a piece of your jewelry because I was blown away by walking into the studio, and I just chose this piece because it was just like a sweet little piece. Because you you seem to do a combination of both found work and modified work. Is there anything behind this?
Well, it's pretty uncanny, actually. This is our best-selling product line.
Is it?
They're custom charm bracelets. So customers go on our website on johnwind.com, and basically there's hundreds of charms to choose from, divided by theme: work and
Mm-hmm.
play, travel, family and friends, arts and culture,
Mm-hmm.
lockets, etc. And there's a 9 charm version, which is what this is. There's a
Mm-hmm.
15 charm. There's a more deluxe version. But what's uncanny about it to me is that this is exactly the same thought process as my sculptures.
Yeah, I can see that,
It's
and I think
objects
a lot of
representing
people
who
do.
we are.
Yeah, this kind of combining different ideas together. Really, it's prominent in the work. I really like it. So I got one more to show, and I really thought this one was sort of fantastic. My question about this is because I started to realize that a lot of your work is almost like totem like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of curious, are you aware of that or are you pursuing that? Uh, and I can't help but say this, you're a very tall person, right? So I'm kind of wondering, your views of things, you
Yeah,
know, are you repeating what you see in these totems, or is that,
that's
or am I just inventing?
That's very funny. I don't know that my height is consciously part of it.
Okay.
Definitely my sexuality. There's a phallic
Right.
verticality, all of this stuff. and less so totems than monuments. I
Hmm.
For the last dozen years or so, I've really been interested in the language of monuments. I went to art school in London back in the 80s and then
Hmm.
went back to the same school, the Slade, for an artist residency for mid-career artists in 2015. And my whole focus was on like the Trafalgar Monument in Trafalgar Square and
Hmm.
trying to break down history from a more personal place. So while this isn't as explicitly about monuments, there is definitely the language, the verticality of those traditional monuments.
I mean, I think you could spend a whole lifetime just on that idea of these totems. I like the fact that you mentioned Nelson. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. Just it's an exquisite piece. One last question about this: what's the height of something like this?
This one's about 5 feet tall.
Okay. Oh, it's bigger than I thought it was.
The books are supported by a commercially available bookshelf that has these thin metal shelves periodically. So it's
Hmm.
like an invisible shelf. And,
Hmm.
it was a clever thing that I saw out in the world and bought one with the idea that I would do something with it. All of the books are from my own library and from
Hmm.
the John Wynne Jewelry display department, those big old ledgers. We used to use them in trade shows to display jewelry on them. And then the bust at the top is a flea market find that I encrusted Archimbaldo style with
Hmm.
shells.
I have to ask a technical question about
Okay.
this. When you're doing this with the books, creating these, I guess, a plinth
Yes.
idea, does the idea of an archival nature play into your mind? Are you thinking about how are these things going to last? Do you glue them together? Do you coat them in any way, or is it just?
Well, it sort of depends on what the plinth in that case. Those books come out. There's a
Hmm.
guide, where I've photographed each section. So, and I store them in order in a couple of banker boxes, so
Hmm.
it could be recreated, fairly accurately. I
Hmm.
didn't put them together because that just seemed like a mess, and
Right.
I didn't know how to do it in a way that would be, archival and logical. And
Yeah.
this seemed fine. But on the other hand, the shell headdress, everything there is glued and
Mm.
varnished together and very intact, and hopefully will last a long time.
Well, I ask that question of a lot of artists, and the answer that we often come to is that that's what conservators are for, right? So that's their job. So I wanted to start and ask you about the storyline. I'm kind of curious how much of your work is driven by a storyline, like a preconceived idea, as opposed to experimentation and play,
Mhm.
right? Because there has to be, or at least your work looks like it's a lot of fun making it. So I'm just kind of curious, what's the driver there?
I would say in the earlier years of my practice, and maybe just a little context that, I wanted to be an artist. I got to go to art school, but then almost by accident, I stumbled into this jewelry business. And for the first few years, this was like 1985 to 1990, the jewelry was my art. They were one and the same. It was completely fulfilling. And that was that. Then life changes, trends change, the economy changes,
Mm-hmm.
and in order to keep the business going, I had to really take. There were two choices. One was to let go of the business and
Mm-hmm.
do something different, and the other was to focus 1,000% on it and put my art aside for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So for like 25 years, I didn't make any art other than the jewelry. But the
Mm-hmm.
jewelry wasn't art in the same way that it had been because it was trying to keep a business going, with
Right.
different impulse. So in order to keep my art muscles going, it, I would go. I would make things at night on weekends. I shared my mom's studio for a while, and it was pure experimentation. Um,
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I like I think that's the title of your next show, Art Muscle. I like that.
that's good. I'm going to write that
Uh,
down.
Do you consider your work, your artwork, to be, do you think of it as autobiographical, or are you trying to make something that's maybe separate?
It's pretty heavily autobiographical.
Yeah,
But a good piece of art, in my mind, it'll function on a few levels. It's autobiographical, but my hope is that the viewer can connect with it in some way as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess with the materials that you're using, you must be constantly looking at new materials and gathering new stuff. Do you have like go-to sources that you always mine?
Well, I mean, both my husband Bill and I love flea marketing, so
Mm,
that is an ongoing part of my practice. And
uh-huh.
something like Whiskey Rebellion, I found the first of those bottles from his godmother, but it turned out that there were more available out in the world. And once I had the project and the idea, I sought out more in a very intentional way, and
Yeah.
that was literally eBay and Etsy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a lot of artists that tell me about eBay. They
Oh
they
my God.
search out something new. So one of the things that I'm kind of interested in, a lot of your work is done in series. So you have this sort of, and I'm kind of curious, do you ever conclude a series or do you ever revive them? Do you work on more than one series at a time? How does that work for you?
Most of the series have an end point, like
Okay.
the women's series that the Cancer Cyborgs was part of. I guess it culminated with the show. I had a solo exhibition at the In Liquid Gallery in 2019, and there were like 20 of them filling this space like it's some crazy party. And after that, I sort of was done with it and on to the next thing.
Okay.
Whiskey Rebellion, I ended up buying more bottles than I was. I had the opportunity to exhibit them at the Museum of the American Revolution, which
Mhm.
was, a real fantasy of mine to tell
Yeah.
this updated story of history. And once that became a reality, and we knew exactly how many cases we had, I had more work than could fit. So I put it aside to come back to on a rainy day, and I haven't had that rainy day yet. So that series isn't finished, but only because I haven't had time.
So we discussed a little bit about the autobiographical nature of your works. When you're making something, is the viewer ever in your mind? Are you ever do you ever think about how people will respond, or are you hoping they'll respond to it?
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, the show that I have up now at the Rosenbach Museum and Library is, on the one hand, somewhat inscrutable and very personal.
Mhm.
But knowing that it's in a public space where most people aren't going to know me or know my story, it was equally important that it work just purely on an aesthetic, visual level. And then, if they want to take the time, the curator and I worked diligently on the wall texts and
Mhm.
accompanying videos and on a takeaway artist guide. Like, I tried to create, and there's a whole podcast series coming up, so I'm
Mhm.
trying to help unpack the material for the viewer so that they can get as much as they want, dig
Right.
into it more.
So it seems like to me that you seem to be on a real roll with your sculptural work. In other words, there seems to be a lots of things there. You've mined a very rich field of ideas in those. For the future, I'm kind of wondering, are there mediums that you haven't done yet that you're thinking you might like to try to see to incorporate them in your work, like photography or poetry or anything else like that?
Well,
Anything you've always wanted to do?
the enlargement conversation,
Okay, that's
that's a big one.
that's
And
the
then,
primary.
yeah, and then I would say that the work that I'm doing now, it's if it starts with an idea like that Rosenbach, the idea was that I live in this house that used to be a private library that was built by a man who bought most of his rare books from the Rosenbachs.
Hmm.
And so there's these three personalities in this story, and there's, as I dug into it, there's all these layers of history and identity and religion and um, being, what does it mean to be a Philadelphia gentleman, for example. So that I had the ideas first and then sought out the materials to make the work. So photography wasn't really part of it, but like if it was in another project, then I would seek out photography. It's not an interest in the medium so much as a
Mhm.
way of how do I tell my story.
Hmm.
And that's
So,
kind of an evolution of my work. It's gone
yeah.
from the more experimental to more intentional, I would say.
How often are you in your studio?
I'm in my studio 6 days a week, but the
Okay.
studio is also the jewelry space. And my third hat is that I run a small family foundation in my mom's name and memory, the Dina Wind Art Foundation. So all three of those enterprises are in this building where I'm speaking to you now. So there's,
So you need more to do, is what I'm hearing.
yeah, it's an ongoing challenge.
Quirky question. We have time for just two more questions. This is the first one's a little quirky. When you go into your studio, one of the crazy questions I like to ask artists is, do you have any rituals that get you moving in your studio? And I'll give you an example. Like I had an artist I interviewed a while ago, and she said, "Well, I need a cup of tea and a half a sandwich and NPR, and that gets me going." Or I have to clean my studio or something. Do you do anything like that, or you just go in and go?
Well, if my intention is to work on my art practice versus foundation or the jewelry business, I listen to different kind of music. And
Hmm.
for years, Missy Elliott has been my go-to because I just think that she was so radical in her,
Uh,
co-opting this space that was a very much a straight man's space. And
yeah,
as a woman, it was she was challenging that. And as a as a businessman wanting to be an artist, I was challenging it. As a gay man, I'm challenging it. As a Jewish person, as like, and I'm trying. That music just makes me feel empowered on, for whatever aspect of my journey I want to challenge.
that is awesome. I'm always trying to get little secrets out of ours. That's the best one for today.
And now
So
these days it's streaming, so it's Missy and her contemporaries.
fantastic. So time for just one final question. Question I ask all artists: what does making art do for you?
I mean, nothing short of giving my life purpose.
Mm.
Yeah. When I don't make art, or when my jewelry wasn't feeling artistic, it's like my identity, something was missing in my soul.
That's a fantastic answer. That just right there is perfect.
Yeah.
Well, John, I can't thank you enough for coming by and talking with me today. Now I got to go back and see your work again. I've got all those answers. Um, but I want to thank you for stopping by. And I also want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch Art Show today. We really appreciate it. If you like and subscribe, that helps push Art Show out to more people. So tune in each week for Art Show. And again, John, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Back at you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye bye.